Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be doing a step-by-step tutorial. It's going to kind of be a tutorial for beginners, kind of like a makeup lesson, and really explaining the do's and don'ts and what I personally think is important to have and to do. Certain tips and tricks and techniques that I think would be helpful for those of you that maybe struggle with certain aspects of your makeup or are just like straight up a beginner, you don't know anything, or maybe you kind of know what you're doing but you could use some, tips and tricks along the way. And also I tried to keep this as budget friendly as possible. One of the number one things I would recommend to people doing their makeup is make sure you have a good skincare routine. Moisturizing your skin, that is the number one step I'm going to say is crucial. Making sure obviously you've cleansed your skin, but moisturizing is so important because if your skin is dehydrated, the makeup is going to cling to those dry, dehydrated areas and it's going to look really, cakey and dry, and it's gonna, enhance that. Finding products that work for your skin type. Even if you have really oily skin, you need to be moisturizing. If you have really excessively oily skin, sometimes that can be from dehydration. So your skin is kind of in panic mode, like my skin is so dry, I'm gonna produce all this oil, and if you already have oil production as an issue, then it's just going to be an excess amount. So if you're moisturizing your skin with a gel oil-free moisturizer that works for you, your skin's actually going to be less oily because it's being properly moisturized and nourished. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about primer. Not everybody uses this. Not everybody thinks it is necessary. I personally do. If you have the right primer, I feel like it helps with long wearing of your makeup. The other thing that I find a primer does is it does help making your, foundation and your base makeup, your face makeup look even better. Primers can fill in pores. The pores won't be as noticeable and the makeup won't sink into the pores as much, and that's going to make your makeup look a lot smoother. Also, I find some primers can reduce redness, blur blemishes and redness. It can also mattify. It can give you a more glowy, luminous finish. So there's definitely options for all of that. I haven't tried a huge amount of primers from the drugstore, I will admit, but one that I did really enjoy that I tried recently is the Poreless Putty Primer by e.l.f. This is really budget friendly. I found, areas that sometimes look a little dry and flaky. It kind of helped in those areas, but it also filled in my pores and smoothed and blurred a little bit. So this one's really good. And then within the e.l.f. line, there's also a new mattifying and luminous version of this. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply that. I find sometimes the best thing for primer is the finger. You can really, press it into the skin. Make sure you have clean hands, obviously. I like to apply primer all over my face. If you don't feel like that's necessary, you can just apply it to troubled areas. So the next thing is foundation. The one thing that I'm going to say is there's different, orders you can do. If you prefer doing your eyes first, obviously I would have done that first. I personally prefer doing my face. But if you struggle when you do your eyes with fallout, if you, have a really hard time cleaning it up or keeping it, in the area you want, I would definitely recommend doing your eyes first. Kind of just have to figure out what you prefer. The next thing is foundation. And I am going to be using my beauty blender. Everybody is also different in what they prefer. So you could use a beauty blender, you could use a brush, you can use your fingers even. I personally think you get a smoother effect with an application tool. I don't really love using brushes for foundation. If I'm going to use a brush, I like to use a brush like this. You can also use a flat, original foundation brush. I personally think I get fuller coverage from this, whereas I know a lot of people do think for full coverage you could use a brush. It really depends on what you feel you get from it. I feel like with the brush you end up having to build more, whereas the beauty blender really just packs it on. It's really just pressing it onto the skin. If you're more comfortable with the brush, that's great. I'm going to do one side with each of them because I want to show you the difference. So I'm gonna go and wet my Beauty Blender. That is the other thing. I personally think that the Beauty Blender works at its best when it's wet. I know some people use it dry. I think that when it's wet, it provides a more seamless effect and it also soaks up less product. So when you're wetting your Beauty Blender, I like to take a paper towel and just squeeze once or twice. Then it'll be more of a damp feel. You don't want it to be wet because then it can water down some of your products. We're gonna do Beauty Blender on this side. I'm gonna be taking my L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Fresh Wear. I love this foundation. It's a really good drugstore option. I'm going to apply with my Beauty Blender. I usually just pick it up like this, or you can apply, you know, dot, 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 and then blend that out. If you find you use too much foundation when you put it on your hand, then I would recommend dotting it on your face first. Just do a couple dots. You can always add more, but it's, you know, you're gonna waste a lot of product if you're constantly pumping out too much. So with the Beauty Blender, you're just dabbing it. I also recommend applying thin layers and then building it if you need to. You don't want to go in with a whole lot of foundation at first because then it might look cakey. Some foundations are a little more forgiving than others and are a bit more buildable, like this one is. You're going to want to go on your ear a little bit. You don't have to, but I personally think it makes it look a little bit more natural and it will flow. You don't have like a line here. You can even lift your ear up and get right in there, and so then that way you have no lines. You do not want that demarcation line. That's that line, if you've ever seen somebody or even maybe noticed on yourself throughout the day, like a line of foundation, especially once you set your foundation, you will notice that more. So you want to bring it underneath the chin, along the jawline, and just down a little bit. If you're not going all the way down your neck, that's really as far as you need to go, as long as then it matches your neck. So now what I'm gonna do is build it up a little bit. So now what I'm gonna do is go ahead with the brush. So you can apply the foundation in swiping motion and then kind of stipple it. That's what I like to do because then you get it off the brush first and apply it in a larger area, and then you can stipple it to blend it. Or I personally prefer the Beauty Blender finish. I just think it has a little bit of a softer, more airbrush finish. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply another thin layer with my Beauty Blender on this side. I just wanted to show you the technique with the brush. So you can go more full coverage, more lighter coverage, like a BB cream or a tinted moisturizer. This is kind of an in-between. And you also, again, can get different finishes. This was a natural finish. You can get matte finish if you're really oily, luminous finish if you're really dry or like that glowy look. The next thing I would do is concealer. Right in here, I have that kind of dark line where I have bags, dark circles. You can also get darkness right here, and like right along here can be red. You might want to cover that up and make it look more flawless. So what I personally like to do is in here is the area I like to conceal the most. So what I like to do is take a more full coverage right here. So you could go in with this also. The other place I like to apply concealer is right over there. Now I like to do this one right here because it's not quite as bright. It's a little more natural. You can use your fingers to blend it out, or Beauty Blender, a brush, whatever you prefer. Again, I prefer my Beauty Blender. I love this thing. So first what I'm going to do is blend out these sides here. I'll go in with this. You, again, like I said, you could do that with this one. Like, you don't need two concealers. This is just what I like to do. Get one that's really close to your skin, or you can get one that's a little bit lighter, and I would recommend that for under the eyes for highlighting the area. And that is another thing that you can do for that triangle. It's to kind of highlight that area. If you were to do cream contour, that would be now. I personally think as a beginner or as someone that's, you know, maybe struggles with makeup, stick to powder products until you are comfortable, because cream contour can get a little bit tricky sometimes, and it is a more advanced technique. So that means the next step would be setting my face. For a pressed powder, I would say drugstore, I really love the Rimmel Stay Matte. It is really nice underneath the eyes or all over the face. And then for a loose powder, I would say Coty Airspun is really great as well. I like the translucent extra coverage. That's my favorite. Use a smaller brush like this. This is Real Techniques 300, but really any brush that's more dense and kind of that tapered shape. And I'm going to take my Rimmel Stay Matte and apply some of that to that brush. Just go underneath the eye, make sure there's no creases. If you have creases in your concealer before you set your under eyes, those creases will be set and really tough to fix. So I'm going to take my Rimmel Stay Matte and I'm going to press that underneath the eye. Your Coty Airspun, same brush, and apply that underneath the eye. Whichever you prefer, loose or pressed, both of them are really great options. And then again, go all over the face, whichever you prefer. I like loose powders a little bit better, so I like to take a larger, fluffier brush. And you don't need a whole lot. So I dip it in my brush, tap off my excess, and then apply it, bring it down the neck, set that. Not everybody needs to use powder. If you have really, really dry skin and you don't feel like you need to, then totally skip this step, because powder can also emphasize texture, lines, wrinkles, dry patches. Powder can ruin a look, but it can also set it in place if you find that your foundation, moves a lot. I personally could not go without setting my foundation. Do a very, very thin veil of powder to set the makeup without applying too much to dry your skin and make it look really dry. There are a couple different ways to do your brows. There is a pencil. Do you like the more like microbladed, kind of creating your own hairs? This would be a good option because they're typically really thin, pointy, precise, and you can get that thin, stroke. And then you can also use it to shade. And so if you like a more natural, I definitely recommend the pencil. Another option is a pomade. I personally think for beginners, this is something you should avoid because it is a lot less forgiving. It's a lot less fixable if you mess up. Something I'm going to recommend for a beginner is just use a brown powder. Powder is really forgiving, it is really easy to work with, and it is really blendable. You can soften it. You could just kind of go back and forth and brush the hairs and it would soften that. And so it's really, really easy for a beginner. So what I recommend is taking a angled brush and dipping in. You can even use eyeshadow. So I'm going to be going off of my Bare Necessities from ColourPop palette today. And this one's great for so many reasons, especially for eyes, but another reason it's great is because there's so many different shades of brown. If you're going to use a powder, make sure it's matte. Taupier color there, that's a pretty universal one. Like I could probably even do that for a really natural light brow. There's this brown here, which is pretty close, but it's a little bit too warm for my hair color. There's this one here, which is similar in color, but a little bit cooler. So that is probably the one that I would go with. There's this like dark brown, which matches my hair kind of perfectly, but I don't like my brows that dark. So I'm gonna go with this color down here, which is Velveteen on this ColourPop palette. First thing I like to do is kind of, especially if you've done your face first, is brush your brows, get all of that foundation and powder out of them. You can, like I said, even with powder, do those hair strokes. I like the more filled in look, so and I'm just gonna brush to kind of soften. I 100% recommend eyeshadow primer. It helps with not only the long wearing of your eyeshadow so that it lasts all day, but it also helps with creasing. If your eyelids get oily or greasy and you find your eyeshadow creases, this will help. I'm using my Milani eyeshadow primer. I think this one's pretty, universal, and like anybody could use it because it is for all skin tones. It has a little bit of a color to it, but it kind of dries down invisible. So if you like eyeshadow primer to kind of cover veins or redness, uneven, tone in your eyelid, then, the e.l.f. Putty Primer is really nice. It has different color options. The MAC Paint Pot in Painterly, if you are lighter in skin tone, you can set your eye primer. So what you can do, take a brush with a basically skin color. I'm going to take full expose with like a really fluffy brush, tap off a lot of the excess. You just want a little bit, and just kind of sweep it along. Just a little bit more. And this is just going to set the eyeshadow so that it's not too tacky. I'm going to keep it really natural and simple today. I'm going to go ahead with my Morphe E30, that big fluffy brush. So I'm going to kind of do a neutral look today. I'm going to go with Hot Gossip in this Bare Necessities palette. So the first step I'm going to do is take that light kind of soft brown, and I'm going to just fluff it in the crease. It depends on your eye shape, and I'm not going to get into that because I could talk about tips and tricks forever. I don't want this video to be too long. The one thing I will say is if you have really close set eyes, do not bring your crease all the way in. I have wide set eyes, and so that is why I bring my crease colors all the way in. Just make sure you're kind of going off of what works with your eyes. Again, if you have really small eyes, you might not want to bring it up too high, or else it'll be up to your brow bone. So you want to leave space from your brow bone. I built that up a little bit, so I just applied kind of in a windshield wiper motion just to get it across, and then I went in circular motions to blend it out. If you feel like you brought something up too high, it's not blending, it's not working for you, what I recommend to do is take a clean brush. When it's totally clean, it's going to blend that color that's already there without adding anything. Tapping off the excess, that's not only going to help you apply less product, but also prevent fallout. So if you experience a lot of fallout, could be the shadows if they're really powdery, but tap your excess off. So once you have that base, then that's when I like to go in with smaller but still kind of fluffy blending brush. I'm gonna go in with my Smashbox one. Again, I'm just gonna keep it really neutral and soft for those of you that are beginners next to it. That's all for you. I'm going to just kind of place it in the crease. I personally like to have it darkest out here, but I do also sometimes bring it all along this line, again because I have wide set eyes. So if you have close set, do not do that. So when you're doing your darker crease colors, you don't want to bring it up as high as those lighter colors. I like to start with a soft transition color so that once you place your darker colors, there's already that kind of transition, and then once you go to blend those two together, it kind of just flows into that lighter color. You could bring it down here a little bit, wherever you like to place it. I'm just going to keep it simple and leave it like that. Then I'm going to take this brush that I used first to blend this color, and I'm going to add no product and just blend this out. So circular motions. You can add your dark color first, blend that out, and then add a lighter color, but I personally think that that's when you kind of get muddy, where the colors kind of just mix in. When you apply like a lighter color over top of a darker color, see how that kind of gets muted and it looks muddy? And I'll do that on this color too. So I applied a light color on top, kind of looks faded and black. I'm then going to utilize some of these tapered brushes where I want that more definition of color. And this brush, if you can see what I mean, darkened that up a bit, but on a more precise, more sharp, because it's flatter and it has a more dense top. Then what I'm going to do is just blend that out. So the last thing that I'm going to do is add a lid color. So if you have a lot of texture in your eyelids, some metallics will emphasize that. And so the thing that you want to do is find either metallics that are really creamy and smooth and don't emphasize. If you find metallics emphasize your eyelids, I would recommend sticking with matte. So I'll just show you the initial color that I used, that just kind of cream. And I'm going to pack it on so it's more intense. So that would be a matte look. Really simple and basic. But if any of you know me, I don't like to go without glitter. So I'm gonna go ahead with Silk Teddy. It's that color right here. I like to use my fingers because I feel like it applies the most intense. If you want a softer look, I would recommend applying it with this just dry. But if you like to apply with a brush and not your finger, the way to get an intense look is to wet it. So on this eye, I'll show you that. Apply the product to the brush and then wet it. So using any setting spray or priming spray, apply just a small amount to your brush, and when it's wet, it's gonna apply the metallic more intense. If you like a softer look, you could just use a fluffy brush and it would be super natural. Remember though, the bigger and fluffier the brush, the less controlled the product is. So when I used that more precise brush in here to just darken, that was because I wanted it to be more controlled. So I'm going to go in with Idle Hour. If you find the eyeshadow palette you have doesn't have an intense enough highlight for your inner corner, even just use your regular face highlight. Next, what we're gonna do is eyeliner. I personally think that liquid is something to avoid as a beginner. It is not forgiving at all. I would recommend sticking to a gel pot or kind of like a pencil. So one that I recommend from the drugstore is the Maybelline Eye Studio Blackest Black. It's the potted liner. There's two options. You can use a similar brush to the brow where it's that slanted brush, or you can use an eyeliner brush where it's kind of just a point. So I'm going to use that because that's what I prefer. I recommend kind of trying to do as thin as possible because you can always go thicker, but it's hard to go thinner. What I like to do is follow the corner of my eye, like right here, and towards my brow. If you have hooded eyes, it's totally different. There's so many different, eye shapes that you would maybe alter this wing. Once you kind of have the point, then you just want to follow with the shape of your eye. Honestly, all I can say is just practice. I'm gonna curl my lashes. I like to get right to the base and kind of pinch it and hold it and pinch it. Obviously not too hard, and make sure that pad's there, else you'll probably cut your lashes. And then just use a mascara, whatever works for you. Again, this is gonna be preference all the way. Everybody's different. I'm really loving the Maybelline Falsies Lash Lift. There's a lot of good drugstore mascaras. If you're applying layer after layer and they end up looking like stumpy and thick at the end, take a clean spoolie, and I think I've said this before, take it and kind of curl it along, and that will kind of help remove some of that excess mascara on the ends. If you get it on your face or your eyelid or wherever other than your lashes, leave it. If you try to remove it when it's wet, you're gonna smear it and it's gonna be a lot harder to fix. If you try to remove it when it's dry, it will flake off 9 times out of 10. I also am going to skip false lashes. I just think for beginners, that's a little bit more of a advanced step. So the next thing I'm gonna do is contour. For a drugstore option, I am really loving this Makeup Revolution Mega Bronzer. I got it in Cool to contour with. And so I'm going to take, this is my favorite brush, an angled contour brush. I like the ones that are a little bit fluffier, so I can pinch it, and I pinch both sides like this. And so I can get that fine line, but then I also in the same brush can blend that out. So there's different ways to contour your face, and not all face shapes need everything. Definitely for anybody, if you like to accentuate your cheekbones, which ultimately makes your face look thinner, contour, darker colors are going to hide something, make it smaller. When you do it here, that's why it makes your face look slimmer, because it's going to make this appear smaller. Contouring should be done with cool toned bronzers, because you're technically trying to create a shadow in your face. Shadows would be a gray, and bronze with warmer. That doesn't mean you can't use your bronzer to contour, and a lot of people do. Not really everybody needs to contour there up here. If you have a heart-shaped face, an inverted triangle face, which is what I have, square, rectangle, those are shapes you want to contour up here to make this part look slimmer. But if you don't need to contour your forehead, just bronze, which means it's just going to add some color and warm it. If I wanted to bronze this up a little bit more, which I probably wouldn't, but if I did, I would take a lighter, warmer shade. I like the Butter Bronzer by Physicians Formula, and I'm going to take a larger brush. I'm going to just go around that to kind of blend it a little more and warm it up a bit on the edges. So the contour is cool, but the bronzing is warm. You could bring this all across the forehead to really bronze that up. If you didn't need to contour your forehead, this is where you would want to bronze the forehead. You can bring it down the neck a little to bronze the neck. What I'm going to do is blush. There's so many blushes that I love. Today I'm going to use Butter Blush by Physicians Formula. You're going to smile and you'll see where the apples of your cheeks are, where it's round. You want to apply it there. You don't want it to come too far down. So contour and blush, you don't want it to come too far down, because it's actually going to make your face look old and drag down, but when you keep it up higher, it's going to lift it. Then I take my powder brush. I'm going to take a little bit of my Coty Airspun, or you could use the Rimmel Stay Matte. Tap off the excess. You only want a little bit. And I'm going to just go around the edges. You could even just use your powder brush with no product, and that'll blend out the edges. Okay, so now as highlight, I really like is the Master Chrome by Maybelline in Molten Rose Gold. I'm going to go in with a fan brush. So you're going to apply it to the brush, tap off the excess, and you want to highlight the cheekbone, but you don't want to go too high so that it's underneath the eye, because that's going to really accentuate your under eye, the top of the apple of the cheek, right along the cheekbone. You don't want it to go too high, you don't want it to go too low. You kind of want it pop it right in there. You can bring it like up here. I like to do that. You don't have to, you could just kind of pop it right there. If you have a lot of texture in your skin, highlighting again can accentuate that. But if you have the proper products and you're applying it in the right place, it can also make you look more awake, more healthy, glowy. If you would like a little more intense highlight, I think I showed you this before. Apply the highlight first to your brush and then mist it. Really take it to the next level. The last step is lips. There are quite a few options for lips. I'm going to keep it simple. For lip liner, I recommend Milani. You want to start in the middle of your bottom lip. If you have a really hard time getting that perfect line, you can even use a little bit of concealer. Really just a touch though, because you don't want to apply too much liquid product over top of powder. But you could use a little bit of concealer after you're done to make that perfect line. The thing I do recommend is filling it in a little bit. You don't have to do the whole lip, but even just a little bit helps it look a little more natural. If you are looking for a liquid lipstick that will last really well, that's drugstore. The Infallible Pro Matte Glosses by L'Oreal are insane. They are really, really good. I'll show you. You want to highlight the inside of the lip. You can use a lighter color lipstick, or you can actually use a highlighter. You can highlight the inner lip with that. And highlighting your inner lip is going to make it bigger, make them look a little more fuller. gonna trick the eye into thinking it's fuller there. If you feel like your face looks cakey or dry, or like your makeup just isn't like sitting well on the skin, using a setting spray that is more hydrating with my MAC Fix Plus or, you know, my Morphe Continuous Setting Spray. If you are really oily, or if you find your makeup, you know, separates or wears down really quickly because of the oils in your face, using one like the All Nighter, they have just the original or the Ultra Matte is good. So I'm going to apply that as well. So that is it for my tips. That was like a lot of information, so I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed this. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, ring the bell, share if you'd like, and have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.